Yeah, try it again.
Leah, do you want to come sit?
John?
Jessica?
Marsha.
Judy.
There's Aaliyah. So I'm just going to give an informative speech on technology. So I just thought I'd start with a story about myself. When I was a kid, my first major piece of technology was an iPod. And it was one of those big iPods that was like green with a black and white screen. And since then, a lot has come about that wasn't then. So back then, there wasn't any such thing as like iPhone navigation, which we use every day. I thought that was interesting. Everybody had a navigation system specific to their car, or you just had to stop on the road to ask for directions. When was the last time that we ever pulled over and asked for directions while we were taking a road trip? We used to have Blockbusters. Now we either go to a Redbox or the movies or just pull up Netflix on our computers. I remember buying CDs, and that still happens a little bit, but tapes, and now it's mostly buying music online on iTunes, or the new one is, I can't remember, but Spotify, the online subscription, thank you. So instead of just buying music, you pay once a month, and then you get unlimited music. And then we were talking the other day about Uber and this age of sharing different things. So Airbnb and Uber and Craigslist and StubHub. We just get on the internet and find people that are selling things themselves. So none of those things in the last 10 years were there 10 years ago when I got my first iPod, which I just thought was a lot looking back, and that's only 10 years. So I'm just going to talk about the different technologies that have developed and what has been happening in social media, and then where I think technology is going to go from there. So I think a big point is the idea of being connected in our culture, and the connectedness, which I would describe as how connected we are to everybody that's on the internet that we're friends with. So when I was younger, we used to be connected by telephone. That was the major way we connected with people that weren't in front of us. And then instant message happened with texting, and instant message on the computer, which was AIM, and that was a new way of connecting with people. You could be talking to them without being on the phone or being in person all the time, and you would just be typing, and you could do it on your computer, or you could do it as you go. So we were able to be connected in a new way, where telephone and person wasn't able to do that before. I remember typing back and forth when Instant Messenger just first came out. That's how I got my first girlfriend. I asked her out on Instant Messenger, and looking back, it's quite funny. But that was a fun time, a new time. And then after that came Facebook, shortly after. So Facebook, as we know, connects people all across the world. We can always be updated on what's going on. So yet again, another level of being connected to the world and to the people around us and not around us. Statistica.com says that there's 1.44 billion people on Facebook, and I was just thinking about the amount of people that I know on Facebook. And I think I could count on a couple hands, on just my two hands, the people that aren't on Facebook, which is pretty crazy. And then from Facebook, I thought the next development, which kind of leads to more connectedness, was Snapchat, which is newer, and I'm not as in on as some. But Snapchat, you can basically take a photo and send it to someone instantly, or you could take a photo and upload it to what they call a story. And the story is, I think, the bigger item going on, because what that does is anytime you see something worth noting, I'm with my family, or I'm with an event, or I'm doing this, that, and the other, I take a picture and upload it to my story, so I'm constantly being updated on what's going on in other people's lives. And for me, I kind of opted out of Snapchat because I think it's almost too much information and too much connectedness on what's going on. But anyways, that's, I think, where we're at now with at least the people younger than me and my age are using Snapchat to be connected at a whole new level. So it's gone from like slightly connected and usually more and more and more and more, and now I'm sure it's going to continue with the level of what's going on. So next, I'm just going to explain what's going on now in technology as far as less social media and more devices, and where that could be going as far as what research says. So first we have the iWatch that just came out. One of many wearable devices. I'm going to talk about here in a second what I think that's doing. There's contact lenses that Google's working on, which seems like a scary, computerized contact seems like a scary idea. But they also say that a big part, the main part of what they're doing is a diabetic piece of the contact that measures the amount of glucose in your tears and then can eventually put in insulin. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then also I just thought it was interesting, in Mission Impossible, a movie I saw last year, the newest one, they have contact photography, which is very scary to me. It's just the privacy and security issues that come with that, but just blinking and you take a photo. I thought that was interesting and worth noting. And then the last one is Google's just working on their driverless cars, which I think would be very cool. And I'm going to talk about here in a second too. So that's kind of what's going on and what's starting to develop. And then the next thing I want to talk about is what could be good about the technology that's coming and what's going on now and what's going to be bad. So I'm going to start with the bad. And some of these are realistic and some of them are not realistic, kind of more silly. But first is robots. Bill Gates was interviewed in an article talking about robots and said some really good things, but I thought one bad thing that could happen is just like the movies of robots becoming artificially intelligent, which is one of the more silly ideas, but that is a danger. I think one bad thing with the technology is as we interact more and more online, we interact less in person, which I think can be dangerous, and just I like being more present to see the here and now rather than the here and now on my phone. And I thought an interesting show called Black Mirror portrayed a scary future, which I don't think is really the case, but they had a guy that had a computerized brain, and what he did, instead of just living his life, he could go back and recollect his memories. So instead of just going through life as a normal person, he would sit at home and just watch the good parts of his life and reminisce, and it basically drove him crazy in the TV show because he was never happy with what was going on. He just wanted to look at the past and the future and things that weren't real. And then I thought this was interesting, and I've heard this other places, but Forbes.com explained how depression is linked with social media, because a lot of people, I've heard this expressed by my friends, but a lot of people go on social media and see that people are having babies and getting married and having really fun vacations and just great times, and they compare it to their life, and they're sitting at home at that time on the computer, and it's not all that exciting, so it makes sense that people would be depressed or be increased into depression because they don't see their life as great as some of the pictures that they're seeing, but they're really just seeing highlighted snippets of people's lives. So that's a bad thing, I think, just because you don't want social media, which can be very good, to lead to depression. And that's just the third and last potential bad. But good things, there's a lot of good, so I think that's where technology will continue to go because people strive for that. I think the obvious one is that people can be connected overseas and long distance in ways like you guys are with the Strauss Spas and whatnot. Long distance to connect is very good. I think it saves time when I'm not standing next to you guys and I can call you or text you, and it's convenient. And then back to the Google thing, the diabetics cure with insulin, not cure, but medicine technique with the contacts could be very good. The driverless cars would be awesome. It would remove human error from the equation with car wrecks, which would save a lot of people. People could finally text and drive because they wouldn't be driving and there would be no wrecks in that case. What Bill Gates was getting at when I mentioned him before is on geekwire.com he explains the positives of the robots, and he says once the simple things like sight and movement are figured out in robots, example, like many tasks that are easy and monotonous can be done by robots. So he uses examples like picking fruit and moving hospital beds around a hospital where doctors and nurses could be used for better things. So that's a very obvious positive, and we can focus our attention on more important things. And then I thought the wearable devices like the iWatch and the contacts have a lot of positives. I think one prediction that I have is that the devices on our wrists will have thermometers and we'll be able to keep up to date on our health and just our vitals as we kind of walk around day to day, which I think would be very good. It could tell us when things are going good or bad, and that would be awesome. Exercise is trackable. Obviously with the iPhones, we run with our phone, it tells us how far we've gone. But with the iWatch, it's easier. I've heard predictions of having your phone be what you use as your keys, so you get close to your door and it recognizes that the device is close, and then your door is unlocked, which is very cool. And then also, Apple's obviously partnered with credit card companies, and with the watch you would be able to just swipe and pay, which would be very cool. So that's where I think the positives and negatives could be going. I think it's really exciting what's going on in technology. We just have to be careful of how far we get into it and what we use it for. So just as my first technology was the iPod mini, and there's been tons and tons of things that have developed since then. My parents were young when the first personal computer was developed, and that's just one generation, and then my great-grandparents were around close to when the TV was being introduced. So as those things have been great, it's interesting to see that those are slowly being replaced, even because technology is just growing and growing. So the iPods are now just basically iPhones. You just carry on your phone, listen to music. The computers are getting smaller, and you're usually taking a laptop around, whereas it used to be like this huge machine. And then the TV stations are struggling because the internet is pushing sports on ESPNWatch.com or Netflix or movies on Netflix or whatnot. So as new technology develops, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then for little Aaliyah, we'll see what happens by the time she's my age or your guys' age, and I don't even know what will be around by then, but it'll be interesting to see. So that's all I have.